Good afternoon, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with an afternoon update on Tropical Storm Sandy down in the Caribbean. Let me zoom in here to this visible satellite shot, and you'll notice a couple things here. First, it has a distinct S shape to the cloud pattern overall, fairly indicative of a well-organized tropical cyclone, but it is lacking a very well-structured banding system to it. You don't see what looks like it's on its way to being a hurricane. Kind of dry here on the west side, a little bit of a dry punch coming in, so it's not completely filled in. This may just be temporary, and maybe it's just in an organizing phase. It does have pretty good outflow overall. You can see that as the winds are coming out. Generally in a divergent pattern. We're going to look at a upper level wind chart in just a minute. But overall, it looks like a healthy tropical storm, but not one that is on its way to any kind of rapid deepening. And that can happen in just a matter of hours, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. Looking at the, well, let's just move ahead to the next map. I want to eventually look at the track map where we talk about impacts to Jamaica, Cuba, and the Bahamas. I've talked about this a lot lately. There's plenty of ocean heat content down there, so that is not going to be an issue. I think the upper level winds and the ability of the system to really develop that inner core will determine how strong it gets before it reaches Jamaica, Cuba, and the Bahamas. So let's look at the upper level winds for the region. First, you can see right here there's a pretty sharp little trough carved out. Then you've got anticyclonic flow trying to develop over the area, some ridging here. Sandy's located right in here where the air is coming out clockwise in a divergent pattern pretty efficiently. But just to the northwest, you do have this pretty sharp little upper level feature, and that is imparting some strong southwesterly winds not too far away from where Sandy is. Now the thinking is that all of this will kind of move in tandem so that you have a pretty good area of high pressure in the upper levels for it to move into for the next 2 to 3 days. In other words, Sandy should move right on up here over Jamaica and then over eastern Cuba into this and staying inside of this fairly favorable upper level pattern, and it's moving kind of with the flow as well, and that'll help it to probably become a hurricane, and maybe even a fairly strong hurricane if it can really start that ramping up process. But there is quite a bit of strong upper level wind flow around it that could impart some shearing action to it if it veers off the forecast track. Probably not going to do that, but pretty decent pattern overall for it to develop. Now here is the forecast track, and you can see that it's forecast to go right over Jamaica and do so possibly as a hurricane at this point. Then over eastern Cuba. Now there's some pretty big mountains right in here, tall mountains that'll disrupt the circulation, hopefully enough that when it emerges over into the Atlantic Ocean here in the southeast Florida Straits towards the Bahamas, that maybe it won't be nearly as strong. We'll have to wait and see. A lot of that will depend on how fast it's moving, etc., etc., and then how thick of a part of the island it goes over. If this comes up on the western side of the cone for some reason and clips across this part of Cuba, then that's going to be, completely different story, as you can imagine. But as far as effects down here, the biggest issue, certainly we got to worry about those winds, especially if it becomes a hurricane. But there's a lot of tropical moisture that's going to get wrung out across this region. The Greater Antilles Islands down here, Jamaica, and then Cuba and Hispaniola, especially Haiti, and then also up into the Bahamas. So don't think that, it's not a hurricane, so it's not a Category 3 hurricane, I'm not going to worry about it. The wind is not the big issue here. It's going to be this torrential rainfall coming over these mountainous areas here, especially in Haiti and eastern Cuba, and that has the potential, Jamaica too, to cause life-threatening mudslides, flash flooding, etc. So please, if you're in that area, don't discount the rainfall aspect. A couple of changes in some of the models. The Canadian, the CMC Environment Canada model, which was showing this sort of nor'easter cane that comes up and hits the mid-Atlantic or the northeast. We've been talking about that sort of superstorm. Now it's not showing that anymore. The Canadian model turning it out to sea which is an interesting change. It kind of joins up with this other low sitting well out in the Atlantic, so that you have just an enormous cyclonic storm system sitting out over the entire North Atlantic basin. The GFS shows the exact same thing. So now we have the Canadian, a little bit farther east, and the GFS both showing their operational runs anyway, their deterministic models, that a track towards Cuba through the Bahamas about 130 miles east of Florida, and then a turn away from the United States, and then staying out here, not coming back and hitting New England. We'll have to see if this is just a temporary fork in the road that we have to get to, because this is 5, 6, 7 days away that we're talking about, and we'll have to see what the Euro shows, the ECMWF. Does it abandon the idea of getting caught in the trough and pulled into the New England states mid-Atlantic, or will it show, yep, it's all nice and, you know, everything's agreeing with each other, and it's out to sea with Sandy after affecting the Caribbean and the Bahamas? So you got to stay tuned. We don't know the answers yet, trying to dissect things and present the best information possible. It's interesting too, because we have so much information available that it can sometimes seem like overload, and so every once in a while you got to just kind of step back and relax about it a little bit and let things play out. But nonetheless, I wanted to examine what we do know as of this afternoon, and we'll see what happens. The first impact, like I've been saying, will be down in the Caribbean, and we will be hoping for the best for people in Jamaica, Cuba, and then the Bahamas. Haiti as well. We can't discount and disregard what's going to happen with all that rainfall. Could be some big problems. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, my website. Always a pleasure to produce these videos for you on Hurricane and Hurricane HD. I hope you learned something from them. I'll be back tomorrow morning with another one.